everyone. Welcome to the Forward Thinking Podcast. It's Chrissy here. Today, I have our guest, Toby Murdock. He's the CEO of Highway Education and second time on the podcast. So happy to have you back, Toby.
It's a rare phenomenon of people who've been second-time guests, I would think, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we haven't had very many folks who've come on a second time. So obviously that means you're a special guest. For those of you who don't know what Highway Education is, it's a great company, really a career launch pad for folks in digital marketing, specifically marketing ops. And we even have Ruben on our team, who is a graduate and has spoken to other folks, and we've had mentors for the program. But today we're going to be talking about findings from a recent report that Highway did with Demandbase on the State of Mops talent. I was part of that, and also some amazing other marketing ops folks like Daryl Alfonso and Sarah McNamara. So it's a really great read and very interesting. There's so many good artifacts there that you can just even screenshot and send to your team or your boss, letting them know about the State of Mops. So yeah, I'm excited, Toby. We can just dive into some of the findings and obviously give my feedback too. But so maybe we'll just kick it off. So it's a little bit of a different market since the report has been posted, but I feel like it's pretty much the same. So what sort of growth is there around demand for talent in MOPS, do you think, even now? And then how are people responding to generating that supply?
Cool. Well, Christy, thanks for having me, two-time guest. Quite honored. And again, you've been super supportive of Highway and our mission, as well as this report that you're referencing. So thanks as always to you and your team for all that support. So, as I work in Highway, I've been working around this puzzle of the marketing ops talent industry, right? And the lack of supply thereof. And I've spent a lot of time talking with experts and leaders in the industry, and everyone comes to me with their hair pulling out and how hard it is to find people and stuff like that. And then I was like, okay, but what's the size of the problem, and can we get some numbers around it, and what's driving people's frustration and hair loss? So I didn't want to do it all alone, so I needed to partner with a company that's a lot bigger than mine. So Demandbase was great, and John Miller and his team, who I know you used to work with, were great partners, and we surveyed almost 800 people in the MOPS industry. So we got a really pretty good data set to start, drawing some conclusions of what's going on with MOPS talent and what exactly are the problems, and giving some people some pointers to what could be the solutions. And it's interesting, everyone knows MOPS is growing, but but how fast is it growing? What does it tell us? We can look at HubSpot, how fast is it growing? We used to be able to see how fast Marketo was growing when it was an independent company. Now it's kind of part of the Adobe, but how fast is this growing? So we got some data around this, just in terms of the number of people, number of companies using B2B marketing operations, so HubSpot, Pardot, Marketo, Eloqua, etc. And so we found that the number of companies since 2016, the number of companies has increased 228%. So a gigantic number. That's from Similar Tech, that it's a pretty reliable source that does this web crawling and can see who has Munchkin or the other JavaScripts kind of installed on their site. So huge increase in the number of companies. And then you multiply that by the number of people per company. On MOPS teams, we've seen 66% growth on the average MOPS team since 2020. And so we estimate worldwide, anything MOPS kind of demand gen related, that it's approaching 1 million professionals in the industry worldwide, at really significant growth rates. So when people are pulling their hair out and are really frustrated on the shortage of MOPS people and how hard they are to find, we can see some numbers here of tremendous growth rates, and again, the number of companies using marketing automation technology and the number of people they have employed around those systems, and we can see where that stress is coming from. This insatiable demand. We see it all the time in our work lives in terms of how many companies are adopting, and how much they're coming to depend on these functions and these systems. But this gives some numbers to see really the kind of stress and the pressure that's being put on the system with those sorts of growth rates.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too when you talk about the growth from 2020, because I think that was definitely a pivotal moment for companies, because they had that big shift with moving a lot of things to digital. And I think there was a lot of reliance on in-person events or more traditional type marketing. And when that happens and you also are looking at your budgets or operational efficiency, it just makes that need for MOPS grow even more.
Yes.
And supporting tech with your new strategies. So it's definitely, I think that was a pivotal time that's then just kind of stayed the standard. And I think people also realize the importance of MOPS over time, which is, I hope part of this podcast was due to that, but also I think just really feeling that need when strategies had to shift.
And you and I were talking before you hit record about how our economy, where it is now, flirting with recession or whatever. But even then, there's really no slowdown in MOPS too. Like you said, even when things get sort of weaker economically, it's so foundational and so fundamental that there's no let up, right? And so there's just so much and so much demand for the function, for the skills, and for the talent, and it's creating tons of pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you had asked too, what is the industry doing about it? The sad part is, I would say, to summarize, nothing much, because we also asked in the survey, how did you get into MOPS? Did you have any sort of formal training, or did you just kind of fall into it and learn on the job? And 93% of our respondents said that they fell into it. And you just compare that to other fields, other professional fields. There's a big demand for, mechanical engineers, and we have dozens of institutions every year that satisfy that demand by producing trained graduates who are ready for the job, or architects, or whatever you want to call it. But because our higher education system lags behind kind of where our economy is, and because MOPS and digital marketing is moving so fast, it just hasn't kept up. So we have no new source of talent being generated. So any kind of market where you have tremendous demand, which we've been talking about, and no new or barely any new supply being generated, at least in any kind of deliberate way, it's all in this kind of happenstance, fall into it way. These are the conditions of a crisis, right? This is a condition where demand is through the roof and little to no supply is being generated in any systematic way. So it's these two factors that's behind, again, all those people pulling their hair out and the frustrations that marketing ops leaders are facing.
Yeah, totally. I think that also I think the frustration for some leaders too is just not really understanding this. So I think it's good that we're talking about this. I think that leaders may understand, yes, it's hard to find this role. Oh, this is the hardest role for us to fill. But then no one kind of really understands the lead up to that. Why is there kind of what you're talking about? People fall into this role, and it's a role that requires a ton of skill as well. So there's a lot of folks who have been working in the job 10, 12 years and now getting to a point where they're really true experts in it. But there's not a lot of then training for then other more junior folks. It's a lot of self-learning, self-teaching. And that obviously doesn't leave a lot of opportunity either for folks, because not a lot of people want to do that. No one, like, it's
Yeah.
a very hard thing to do, to teach yourself
And
your
it's
skill.
funny because I talk to a lot of people about this issue, and they're like, well, back when I was starting in MOPS, I walked uphill both ways to and from work, and I learned it all myself. And that is true, maybe not to uphill, but that is true that like
Totally.
you and you know the people who are currently MOPS leaders did teach it all themselves, but that's like very rare, right? So it's great that like
Right.
we found these like super, resourceful people who were able to do that. And that kind of was how the first wave of people, but now with this incredible growth, it's just not sustainable that we're just like, and we need to
Right.
continue to satisfy this tremendous demand by all these people who are so tough and so have so much ingenuity that they can just figure it out themselves. That's like, then we should just close down the education system if that's our approach to everything, because just everyone would be so tough that they're able to like figure it out on their own. It's great that so many pioneers and MOPS did that, but it's no way
Mhm.
that the industry is going to get to the next phase of its growth.
No, I think especially for if you're on the hiring side, like, you want that level, like base level. You want some of that learning to come from to be there, or because you want like a good base, because okay, how much resource and training can I do? You want to get that person up to speed really quickly. So to your point, like, okay, yes, it's possible, and like you said, yes, people like myself and stuff, we've had to do that, but doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. So, or the easiest way. So I totally agree. I think with this, like we've talked about the crisis before, and the state of MOPS, and now this report's kind of putting some numbers around it, but we're really feeling, we've all really felt the pain of this. Whether it doesn't matter, like I think what org you're in, because if you're on a team, you're wishing you had more people on your team. If you're a manager, you're wishing you had more people below you that can help you. If you're a leader, you're wishing that, you didn't have to spend half of your budget for one person when you could get more people, because like you're trying to find right talent is also really expensive. So we're feeling those kind of effects. But based on what we saw across the report, what do you think are some of the other effects of this like supply and demand imbalance in the
Yeah,
MOPS
a
field?
few things. So one, mentioned a little bit, organizations are getting really kind of top heavy. That
Hmm.
they're instead of a typical and a healthy market have kind of a pyramid like structure where we have a few super experts, a larger number of reasonably experienced people, and then the widest number of people who are junior level folks who are able to kind of come in and do a lot of the lower level work, so that the more senior people can really live their experience and do more sophisticated stuff. Instead, we found in our survey a little bit over a third of our respondents said that they felt that their work was too easy for them, and that they would benefit
Wow.
from having the ability to delegate more of their work. And I think that's also related to some other statistics we found. Found that over half of MOPS pros are struggling with burnout,
Mm-hmm.
and almost 3/4 say that the average tenure in the industry is about 2 years or less. So that's all telling signs. So and so what I'm trying to do is put the numbers together with like my conversations and my LinkedIn feed, right? And I know, Chrissy, I feel like you are the queen of MOPS LinkedIn, so you probably know this more than anyone. But everyone's always talking about burnout. Everyone's always talking about turnover in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
This puts some numbers around behind it, and I think draws some lines, right? When you see people saying, too much of the work that I do is too easy. I really wish I could delegate it. That's a huge driver. Then people like, I'm sick of this. Like I'm burnout. I need a break, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm quitting. I'm moving on because I've been at this for you know 5 years, 7 years, and I want to focus on the new challenges and frontiers, and I found myself cleaning out fields in contact databases, or
Mm-hmm.
doing rudimentary work and creating forms or whatever, and that's a huge drive. It's this kind of dysfunctional um, ecosystem where, again, instead of healthy and shaped like a pyramid, it's some other kind of polygon. I don't know, and and we need to reverse it. But there's sort of, it's hard to do without that new supply coming in. But it's kind of it's a sick system from that
Mm-hmm.
perspective, and not to mention salaries going up, which is something that we also found that salaries, according to our survey, are growing at twice the annual inflation rate
Mm-hmm.
in the study, which isn't surprising to anyone who's been in the industry and seen it. And while it's obviously beneficial for a good number of Mops people, it's also a challenge for more managers and leaders who are trying to manage budgets. And again, I think things would be better. It would just be healthier overall, budget wise, if you could have more of a blend between junior and more experienced people. And in terms of the job satisfaction and tenure of the more senior people, if they could have more of a blend, and they could more effectively delegate down work and not be so burdened by having to do everything themselves.
Yeah. I think I have a few comments to things you said, because I think for the folks that are, doing the work that is, you know, too easy for them, or in some cases just, monotonous, or just like you said, just they're not taking on the big challenging strategic projects that they want to do. They're just stuck down in the firefighting. And we talk about that a lot and try and push Mops folks to get beyond that, but sometimes that can be tough when the team is small and there's not enough people. But it also just limits their growth, so then you just see that they'll start to feel like, oh, my growth isn't happening the rate I want, my learning isn't, and then they're trying to go to another place, right? So
Yeah.
that's like the 10-year thing, right? The 10 years really low, because like, oh, well, if it's like this here, well, maybe it'll be different somewhere else. And I think a lot
Well,
of
plus
folks
they're going to pay
find,
me 25 grand more because
yeah.
there is such a lack of supply. So there's all these factors between, job dissatisfaction because I'm not doing the growth work, and that there's so much demand that people just keep leapfrogging.
Totally. And then you're just picking up where someone, tried to leave off, and then you probably find you're in a similar situation. So I think also the salary things, I think it's great because marketing ops folks are getting paid what they need. But I think also it's become so, like, maybe too inflated in certain cases. And yes, that can actually hurt some folks in their career, because if they're at a certain level and they're like hit a certain cap and they go to their next job and they're, demanding that pay, that company might be like, okay, well, you're there, but we're gonna kind of keep you there because we hired you at like our max kind of level. Or they might get a little bit turned off and be like, okay, this candidate isn't right for us, and like, let's move on. Because what one company might pay you, 10 other companies might not, and they'll get sticker shock when seeing it. So that can also hurt your chances of maybe actually getting an opportunity that's more fulfilling, maybe opens more learning. And so you're really just kind of, I think, have a bit of a golden handcuff situation where you feel like, okay, I can't get more money than what I'm getting right now, but this environment isn't good for me either. And so I think MOPS folks really need to think too about, okay, my pay, there's more than just pay when it comes to job satisfaction.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also quite, kind of limiting, or could be hindering folks in the market.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. And it's not like it's gonna go down anytime
No.
soon, right?
No.
So it's not like MOPS folks are any kind of risk of having erosion in their pricing power or their earnings
No.
potential. But I just think, to your point, everyone would be better off, especially in the big picture of happiness overall, of which pay is just a subset, if we had sort of a more balanced and healthier kind of labor market and ecosystem in the field.
Yeah. When you're looking, when you when you guys were doing the survey, when you look across like some of even your clients at Highway, do you feel like when you're having conversations with folks about their talent and seniority, like do you feel like it's they're just really a big need for having folks like more junior folks that can then like get to work? And are you seeing like that, or are you also seeing just like there's a director and then there's no one else, so they're trying to fill those gaps with like senior
Yeah,
managers and managers?
I almost feel like the dysfunction has gone on so long that people have to sort of rediscover what normal is. You know what I mean? Like, and they have to like reorient themselves and figure out which way is up. So, like, the conversation that I have is like, I finally decided that, so I have two directors, and I finally decided, that in terms of our two directors in the space and maybe some more senior managers, that we would have some junior people, right? Because we do tons of, just the execution level of our campaigns, and we're having these senior people do it. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to get a junior person in to do that. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, no shit. But I think people, but, but I think that people have just come to accept that there aren't junior people, and if there are, they're not going to be job ready. So I don't want to train them, and so I'm not even going
Yeah.
to consider hiring that. I'm just going to kind of baseline expect I'm not going to get anyone cheaper for like 150 grand. And even though they've been doing this for 4 or 5 years and they can like crank out campaigns in their sleep, they're the people I have, and they're going to do that work. And so for me, and I have a lot of these conversations, they're just sort of, it's people are just starting to have, at least, they're probably not talking to me unless they're starting to have this breakthrough, but they're having this breakthrough of thinking like, oh shit, like maybe it doesn't have to be that way, and maybe I can have junior people who do the routine and more mundane stuff, because they're way more cost effective, and they'll let my more senior people be happy because they can focus on the more challenging work, at the kind of the frontier of their capability. Um, but it's
Yeah.
it's almost like a discovery that people are coming to, that of even this possibility, because this dysfunction has been going on for so long.
Yeah. I think one thing that's key there too, and I think what can be successful for junior folks, like a lot of times it's like, oh, we have, an intern who comes on, they're more of a generalist, and then they'll help out a whole marketing team or whatnot. Or maybe you have like one junior person, but then they're supporting a team of like 5 people. And I think what we find at CS2 that works really well is try to do a ratio where you have a junior person with a more senior person, and it's almost like a 1-to-1 kind of situation. Just because the amount of time it takes to train or hands-on in this, in what we do, especially with like you talked about with the rate that things change or the amount of learning you have to do, you almost like want, you know, you can't just like leave that person to just figure it
Yeah,
out. You
back in the
could,
old days,
but
that's what
you're
we
not
did,
going to get the
Chrissy. That's what we
results
did in
that
the
you
old
want.
days.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I just think that and even back then, like I remember one of my bosses just saying to me, like, granted, he was a great boss, but he would be so busy and he'd be like, just Google it, or like, I would be so like nervous to even ask like my boss for help because you just know how busy they were and strapped for time. And I think you want to create an environment and be realistic. Okay, if we're going to bring on folks to really help, there should be a clear line of like, okay, who's going to be training this person, but also but who's going to just be
Yeah.
mentoring them, who's going to be teaching them, and
I
that's
think
really
that one to
key.
one is exactly right, because if done well, it's really beneficial for both, right? That senior person,
Mm-hmm.
again, doesn't want to spend their time cleaning the database or cranking out the campaigns or running the reports and stuff, right? And you can absolutely, if you want to
Mm-hmm.
call me, I can tell you, you can absolutely find people who are job ready to do that, who are junior at a reasonable price, right? So that saves huge amounts of time for the senior person.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like you said, the junior person, well, obviously they're going to be resilient and they're going to figure out a lot themselves, but they still, if they're still, leaning on themselves a ton, there are going to be times where there's key questions and key mentorship that they're going to receive from people that is massively beneficial. So I think that 1-to-1 ratio, if done right, and you get in the junior person who has that threshold level of skills, so they don't have to go through the rudimentary training, everybody wins. Like the senior person is more productive, focuses on what they want to do, and the junior person has that mentorship that really, furthers and accelerates their advancement.
Totally. Yeah. I want to talk about one last thing around the burnout side, because I know in the report I talked about burnout, but also I talked about languishing, which is like just the inability to finish projects, which a lot of marketing ops teams really struggle with, because you have all these competing priorities and the rate at which some of those shift are faster than what you realistically can do. So it's very hard to see all your big strategic projects come to fruition. And because you're just dealing with firefighting and things like that, so you'll start something. But so I think that plays a role. But I think there now that the concept of burnout obviously is across the board. Like, you see it on LinkedIn. A lot of people are rethinking their job environment, stuff like that. But especially in MOPS, I think it's known for being kind of a world that's challenging and has that risk of burnout and turnover. And how do you think that then plays a negative effect in just creating interest for people to take on this job or come into the market? Because I think about that as well. It's like we have a limiting chance for people coming into MOPS, but also, do you feel like some of the negative sentiment can also just turn people off from wanting to go down that career path as well?
Not so much, to tell you the truth, at least from my vantage point, because I'm dealing with a lot of people who are just coming into the career path, right? Given what I do.
Yeah.
And, there's so much more awareness of SEO, of social media marketing, of pay-per-click. Like, no one even knows what MOPS is. I mean, just like no one even knows what MOPS is. By and large, if you surveyed, 100, marketing graduates of college students, marketing graduates, like one might even know what MOPS is. It's just because it's not as nearly as consumer facing. The other thing is, even if they were interested, how would they learn how to do it? For Google Analytics, you get a free instance of Google Analytics, and you can go learn with it, play with it. Like Marketo, there ain't no free instance of Marketo. Even if you go and do Marketo certifications, it's all on this virtual screen, blah 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 BS. It's really shut off, so no one even knows what it is, to tell you the truth. So I don't think it's a turnoff for those thinking of entering it. I would say, though, for those...
That's good. That's why I wanted to ask, because I think that you're right. I don't even think people even maybe plays a role for the market, because I think people just don't even know that there's this job. But I think what I hope too, and what I think Highway Education or you guys are doing, is just shine a light on, this is like a valuable career.
Yeah.
This is something that's in demand, right? Like, there's so many opportunities. So I think, yes, there's some chances of some of that, what people experience, but I think there's still a lot of people who are just wanting their foot.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. I mean, once they learn about it, they're like, this is fantastic, right? And so I think it has fantastic appeal, but it's just hard for it to kind of generate. It hasn't generated much wider labor market awareness, has been my experience. But I will say, to your point about languishing, though, I think that's a powerful one, right? So frustrating. It's a special kind of burnout, right? When there's all these things that you can do, that you want to do, that you should do to do things well, and you're just firefighting, and you're doing things half-ass, and you're generating tons of technical debt, and things just aren't working well, right? That's like a special kind of purgatory that so many MOPS people are in, right? And it's because, again, there's the sense that junior people don't exist, we can't delegate, and it creates this really bad situation for everyone. And that languishing is a particularly torturous form of burnout.
Yeah, definitely. All right, to end, I want to talk about, what people are experiencing with hiring and maybe how we can improve upon the situation. But from the report or from your findings, like how, from a way we can maybe quantify it, but how much time and money is actually spent on hiring for
Yeah, so
mops right now?
we asked people how long does it take just in duration to hire one, how much time is spent, um, and then how much do they spend on like external resources like ads and recruiters. We found that over $20,000 on average per hire, both between explicit spending and the spending on payroll for people who are spending time hiring, just because it's so hard. It's so hard to find people. So that's really significant. We also found it was over $30,000 spent on training new junior level people. For those who do bring in junior level people, we found that the majority of them took 6 to 9 months to get fully ramped, and that the team was investing lots of hours, almost between about 8 hours a week, of team hours in ramping that person. So that's a lot of time and resources. So it's hard. It's just when the market is so tight for the reasons that we talked about. It's
Yeah.
a the solution is let's get more people, but when to go to get more people is so expensive in time and resources, both to bring them on and to train them up, it can be really discouraging. People just tend to like, oh, fuck it. And they stick with the status quo and they just kind of grind away. Like I said, a lot of people
True.
just don't even think it's possible to get junior people who won't take a long ramp, who are affordable, and will happily do that junior level stuff that can be delegated down to. They don't think that exists, and that sort of holds them back in their conception of how their teams might function.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard too. It's like when there's that, you see also just turnover happening. So when you're trying to invest money into acquiring your talent, then training the talent, then you might lose that
Yeah.
talent. It can then hurt some orgs from even wanting to and invest the money again, because they get burned and feel like they have to start at square zero,
Well,
zero
that's the
again. So
overall dynamic right now. So just a quick stat on that. When I was graduating college, so this was in the 90s. I'm quite a bit older than you. The average college graduate in their first 5 years of um, post college had on average 1.3 jobs. Now it's approaching three. So there's a lot more mobility in the labor market, mostly because of all the information the internet has kind of unleashed, which is a good thing in a lot of ways. But
yeah.
because of that, the downside is, like you said, an aversion to training. If I'm going to have to spend a ton of time training someone and the market is so mobile, and I know that I'm going to hire them, and they're not going to be, they're not going to have that much value to me. I'm not going to pay them that much. But then their market value is going to increase dramatically as I train them and get experience. And then they're going to skedaddle, and my investment is wasted. It's like, it's a, it's a, the benefit of the new labor market mobility is great, but it really discourages the training investments that are needed to kind of
Mhm.
help a market like ours and MOPS where there's such a lack of new supply.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you just see a bunch of people being mobile, but not even getting all of the like learning or experience or even reps at those like strategic projects that they really need, which then impacts people's perceptions of mops. And everyone has different skill sets. Some are really advanced, some are not. They just have moved on to so many jobs, different titles, different pay, but their skills are exactly the same. But that could be totally different for someone else. So it then for hiring managers, they're getting kind of like mixed, it's really hard for hiring managers, especially if you're not in Mops. If you're like a
Oh yeah.
recruiter, and it's hard to see consistency across the board and then provide to your client, okay, these employee or potential employees are one-to-one. So it takes a lot more time to kind of see, okay, what actually is the right fit, who is the right fit, do their skills actually match what we need. We can't just go just based on past
Yeah, and
experience.
it's sort of it's really an impossible, or not impossible, but a super challenging situation to solve, right? Like, once you're
Yeah.
kind of speculating, well, how well can this person grow into this, even if they don't have experience, and it's really risky.
Yeah. So what can the industry start doing to improve this
Well, I mean, that's
situation?
kind of a softball, but I think that, no, as we've talked about, I think the root cause of all of these challenges is a lack of new supply being generated. And so,
Yeah.
fortunately, that's what we're doing at Highway. We recruit and we do a lot of that evaluation for finding people who are high potential, but maybe haven't realized the potential a lot in their skills. We also have a social mission, so we focus on people from disadvantaged background. So finding out those high potential people and identifying them, then we hire them, and for the first few months, all we do is train them, and we have a super rigorous training program that a whole bunch of people in the industry helped us devise, yourself included. That's been really effective in getting people to job readiness. You mentioned Ruben on your team. I loved when I interviewed Charlie, bless his heart, and he talked about how Ruben was billable in his first month, and that's just
Yeah.
the what we try to achieve is through our training we can deliver people that are job ready. So in an agency, they're billable, in-house, they're not billable, but they're adding value, within that first 30 days period because they've gone through our training, but they're also really inexpensive and they're also really willing to do that, lower level of operational work to prevent the burnout, to let senior people focus on senior topics and senior issues and make this whole industry a lot more functional. So we hope that in what we're doing, to generate new supply that's job ready, that's affordable, and that aligns with a lot of leaders' kind of social values, that we can help the industry get where it needs to go for its next phase of growth.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to be linking to the report in the show notes, but we'll also link to Highway Education's website and Toby's LinkedIn. So if you have any questions on Highway, I'm sure he'll be happy to talk with you, whether you're an employer or you're another agency owner like myself, or just someone who's interested in learning more, and you might even know someone who's a great candidate for it. Definitely encourage you all to reach out to Toby or check out the website and learn more about the program. I think it's much needed. I think also universities, if you're listening, should be taking some notes. Maybe you need to partner with
Yeah,
Highway
Cal Poly.
to see what they're doing. Yeah, Cal Poly. I there's that hopefully that comes up soon. But for now, we'll see Highway Education as part of the answer. So thank you so much, Toby, again for being on the podcast. The report was awesome, like I said. So for all of you who haven't seen it, check it out in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it with your colleagues and friends. And we'll see you next time on Forward Thinking. Thanks, Toby.